Hello and welcome to pmclounge.com. In this important video, we are going to understand what exactly are story points. And we've talked about user stories in one of our past videos. I'll share a direct link to that video in the description. Actually, it is going to be the second link because the first link is going to be an article on this topic. So if you are interested in reading articles rather than watching videos, then first link will take you to that article. Second link, of course, the video for user stories. Third link, an entire playlist of all videos that you need to watch to prepare for your PMP exam, the agile part of your PMP exam, right? And fourth list, of course, if you're preparing for your PMI-ACP, you can refer to that. All right, with that being clear, that being said, let's understand what are story points. Quick reminder, please hit the like button. It helps us spread the word about PMC Lounge. Okay, so do you remember user story? Like I said, second link in the description if you don't remember it to that video. Now, this was an example user story, a template of a user story that we discussed in that video. And the user story has a title, it has story points, then it has three things. As a type of user, let's say as a customer, or I want to, whatever that you want to do, so that what should be the end result. Now, what we are discussing in this video is story points. What exactly are story points and how do you enter any points here, right? It could be 1, 2, it could be 10, 20, whatever that your team decides. But how do you enter story points in a story? Let's get into that. So a bit of fun here, some points that you should remember about user points. And these could be some misconceptions that are actually popular and some teams tend to have. Number one is story points is not an exact effort estimate. So when a team shares story points, they are not giving you an exact efforts that it is going to take to complete the story, right? The user story. And secondly, story points are also not a completion date estimate. So when a team gives you story points, they're not giving you an exact date of, hey, this user story will be done by 20th of December or something of that sorts, right? So story points is not an exact effort estimate. It is not even a completion date estimate. It is also not used to determine which order the features will be delivered. So just because a user story has a story point of 1 and the other one has a story point of 5, it doesn't mean that 1 will be something that the team will work on first, or 5 is something that the team is going to work on first. No. So use story points are not used to determine the order in which the features will be delivered or will be worked upon by the development team. Story points, what exactly is story points is that it means assigning a point value. It could be 1, it could be 5 to each story in your backlog based on how big it is as compared to other stories in the backlog. So you take a look at a user story, you compare it with how big it is as compared to other user stories that you have, and then you basically give it a point value. It could be 1, it could be 5, it could be 10, it could be whatever that your team decides on. Now, by focusing on relative size, remember it is relative because you're comparing the user story with other stories as well. So when you're focusing on relative size of the features and not the exact amount of time, remember in point 1 we talked about how it is not an exact effort estimate or a completion date estimate. So when you focus on relative size and not the exact amount of time, the Scrum team stays engaged and is allowed for uncertainty in their plans. So you're not asking for certain exact dates, exact estimates from your Scrum team, and that keeps them engaged, and that also allows them, gives them a breather for any kind of uncertainty. Remember, we are working in an agile environment right now, right? So it is an uncertain environment. You have to things change, you have to be welcoming of changes. So there is a lot of uncertainty, and that is something which, using story points, you are allowing your Scrum team to do so, to basically allow for any kind of uncertainty in their plans. So how does this all work? And we'll try to understand this with the help of three steps. Step one is picking a number of points that indicates the amount of effort required for each story. So you basically pick a number of points for that represents the amount of effort required for a certain user story. Secondly, you repeat this exercise for each story in the sprint backlog. So you're basically picking number of points for each story in your sprint backlog, and you repeat this until all the user stories have an assigned number. So all stories now have an assigned point value. Now with this number, the team is not trying to predict how much time it will take, which is something that we talked about, to build the feature. Instead, the team assigns a point value to each story based on its size relative to the other features that they've built in the past, relative to the other features that are present in the sprint backlog as well. They can, if they want, they can take reference of that. They can take reference of whatever their experience has been in the past. So this is a relative value, and this is how points are assigned to all the user stories. Quick reminder, you can head over to pmclounge.com/pmp practice questions if you want to practice for your PMP exam. Everything's free. Check it out. So this slide is important because it is going to give you an idea about how story points are given to user stories. We talked about how, some user story may have story point, some story may have 5 story point. How is it decided, right? So some teams take reference of t-shirt sizes. So what they're basically going to do is, if it's an extra small user story, they will give it 1 point. If it's small, they may give it 2 point. If it's medium, they may give it 3 point, right? Similarly, they'll look at a user story, they'll discuss among themselves, what should be the t-shirt size that this user story reflects, and based on that, story points are given to those user stories. Some teams can also use Fibonacci sequence, that is 1 2 3 4 3 5, not 4, then 8 13 21, and so on. So some teams feel that, if there is an extra large feature, instead of giving it a value of 5, it should get a value of 8, because that is more realistic. So they may opt for using Fibonacci sequence to give story points to their user stories. The team obviously gets better at using these scales as long as they use it consistently. So if the team sticks to using t-shirt sizes, kind of points to be given to their user stories, right? Using t-shirt sizes as a reference to basically give points to their user stories. And if they stick to it, if they consistently use it, the team is obviously going to get better at it. They might, if they want to stick to Fibonacci sequence and they use it consistently, then obviously they are going to get better at it. They're also going to understand if having t-shirt sizes is realistic for them, or having using Fibonacci sequence is something which is realistic for them. So it depends. And of course, as long as the team continues to use it, they are going to get better at it. So what exactly is sprint velocity? This is also a small concept which I thought should be something that we should discuss right now, since we are talking about story points. Now, the total number of story points completed in a sprint, it determines the sprint velocity. As simple as that. You don't have to use any mathematical formulas or anything to calculate sprint velocity. The total number of story points that the team has completed, that is what sprint velocity is. So here's an example. If the team completes 10 user stories totaling 50 story points, so there were 10 user stories and the total number of story points of these 10 user stories was 50 story points, then 50 is the sprint velocity, right? And this is also going to help you to plan for your next sprint, because you now have an idea, you've delivered a sprint and you now have an idea that the development team can deliver 50 story points. not necessarily 10 user stories, right? Because if there are 50 small, extra small user stories with one story point, then the team can actually deliver 50 user stories. So that is why calculating sprint velocity is important, because now you have a fair idea of the amount of story points that your team can deliver. Now, obviously, there is a learning curve to all this. We talked about it in the previous slide as well, that as long as the team consistently uses these methods, right? Consistently they use what kind of story points they need to assign to their user stories, and they consistently calculate the sprint velocity and try to figure out how many story points they can complete in every sprint. The team is going to get better. So team gets better at assigning story points and the number of points they can deliver in each sprint as they gain more experience. Finally, I hope you remember the user story that we talked about. It has a title and then it has a story point. Now, how do you enter a story point to a user story? It's very simple. The team needs to agree. So that means the team actually is discussing how many story points should be assigned to a user story. And based on how big the story is, story points can be assigned by the team. Now, this is something which is this works and this is effective because of the principle that it follows. The principle is, I hope you remember this principle, the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. And entering story points for every single user story in your backlog is definitely going to lead to face-to-face conversations, and not so much in the times that we are in today. So it may lead to more and more Zoom calls or whatever. But the fact is, having story points, having the development team agree to putting story points for all the user stories in the backlog is going to incite conversation, is going to, have teams get together and work together, give story points, get engaged, and then work on those user stories. So here's the question for this video. What is your role? If you're the Scrum Master, what is your role in estimating story points? This is a good question for your real life projects, for your interview purposes as well. So what is your role as a Scrum Master in estimating story points? Let me know in the comments. Definitely looking forward to your answers. So that's all that we had in this video. I hope you were able to understand what story points are and how sprint velocity is calculated. There's no calculation involved though. Subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon to stay notified every time we upload new content. Don't forget to check out our website pmclounge.com, and if you like our work, consider contributing at pmclounge.com/contribute. Thank you.